Okay, so this is Screencast, chapters 1, 2, and 3, part 6. So we are beginning with creativity. So what is creativity? There is a whole list of creative traits, but it's being inventive, original, all of those things that are bundled up. So it doesn't mean someone who necessarily thinks of themselves as an artist is not creative. Okay, so here's that list of creative traits: sensitivity, originality, productivity, analytical skill, organizational skill, flexibility, playfulness, fluency. So you can see there's a lot there. And, you know, I usually, by looking at the class, say, oh, I can tell you are the playful one. And what do I mean by that? I mean by, when you go to a family function, are you that person that every one of the kids wants to sit with? Are you the one that they want to do things with? Okay, so that's kind of what I mean by creative. By no means, I am not playful whatsoever. I had a guy one time, we used to have wrestling here at the college, and I had the big heavyweight guy. He was, 200 something plus pound guy, big guy. And he said, well, I'm flexible. And he got up in front of the class and did splits. Yes, he was flexible, but that was not exactly what I was meaning by flexibility. I was meaning that most of us have to be flexible at certain situations and certain times. Are we all going to like our coworkers? Are we all going to like our bosses? No, not necessarily. And we are creative in the way that we handle those situations by being flexible. And that's what I mean by that. So some of these you can understand, that originality, all of those things. But some of the others, they are, a little bit more into that idea of how do I handle myself in certain situations. Now, people in every line of work, if they are good at their job, you look for ways to be creative. Okay, now what is the role of the patron? Now, the role of the patron, remember, is the person who commissions or buys the work of art. Okay, now what would motivate a patron to support art? There's different reasons. I mean, we can go back to that implying value. There's money, there's social status, there's this intellectual side of it, but there's other things. I mean, think about companies. Why would a company support art? Maybe they need a logo. Right? So you don't get any better than the golden arches. We know anywhere in the world, if we see that big giant golden M, it's McDonald's. We can get us a burger and some French fries. So those are, think about outside the box what you would normally think of. Now, why would an establishment purchase art to reflect an ideal? Just what I said. They want for you to think of their product, whatever it is that they are selling us, that it is better than everyone else's. So we may not necessarily think that Burger King or McDonald's is better than any of the others, but we do have a sense of comfort in the fact that you know what you're going to get when you get there. Now, what is the role of the observer? The observer is everyone else, everyone who looks at art, reacts to art. We are all an observer. It just depends upon whether we create the art or we buy the art. Okay, so you are an observer. Now, the role of the observer is determined by three things. Now, these three things are extremely important. I think they're probably the most important thing that you can get out of this class. Okay, so here's kind of that listing. Number one is perception. This is the process by which our minds interpret the information we collect with our eyes. So how do we perceive something? Okay, then exposure. By looking at as much art as possible and really seeing it. How much exposure have you had to art? Unless you have some sort of family that enjoys the arts, takes part in the arts, you may not have ever really had that exposure. So your perception is changed by that exposure. Example, how many of you are an athlete? If you were an athlete, your parents probably had you have some sort of, let's say, baseball lessons or pitching lessons or, tennis lessons. You had golf lessons. Okay, that's that exposure that you got. If you didn't have somebody in the arts exposing you to it, your perception of the arts may be different. Okay, so how do you perceive depends upon that exposure. And then studying, that's that third thing. It's the understanding how, which is the process, why, which is the reason the art is created, and the what, which is the before and the after the art was made. So what's going on? Is the process, is this a long drawn out process? Does that artwork cost so much because it took that person 5 years to make? Maybe, okay? Another thing, why was it created? I broach that subject all the time with my art studio majors because, I can remember I had a guy who came in, really good artist. He could draw and paint just about anything he wanted to, and he came in and he wanted to draw paint a painting of a woman with a squid on her head. And I was like, why do you want to do that? I mean, is that anything that says anything about our time in which we live in? Is there some significance to that? Or are you just doing it because you're like, oh, I'm going to take these two things and put them together? Ta-da! That doesn't make that art memorable. Okay? So something to think about. Perception, exposure, and studying. Now, 3 factors helpful in the appreciation of art. The actual physical substance of the artwork itself, of course. The artist's intention in making the work. So why did they do that? And then the observer's perception of the work. So sometimes the artist could do things and we, the observer, not really understand what it is we're even looking at. Why is that canvas painted nothing but a solid blue and I'm supposed to be impressed by that? That's that perception that happens. So those 3 factors are important in the appreciation of art. What do observers think about? What do you think about when you look at art? Is it something that has to be pretty? Or do you like things that is maybe conceptually challenging? Do you like something that maybe has a global message to it? There are different things that you think about. When you pass artwork in the hall, is it just color that grabs your eye? Is it the subject matter that grabs your eye? Is it maybe the textures that are happening? Those are the kinds of things that you need to think about when you're looking at art. Okay, this is a painting that is done by the artist named Marcel Duchamp. It is entitled Nude Descending a Staircase. This particular painting, I want you to think about, do you like it? Do you see the nude descending a staircase? So here is the head. Here is the torso. Collarbone coming to the shoulder, out to the elbow, going down to the pelvis. Upper thigh with the knee going back and the leg going back and the leg going forward. So here along here you can see the edge of the stairs. So I understand in my experience most of you probably didn't see that. But what we're looking at is these stages of different things that are happening. This quote might help you with that. This is a quote by Marcel Duchamp about this painting. My aim was a static representation of movement, a static composition of indications of various positions taken by a form in movement, with no attempt to give cinema effects through painting. So, what does that mean? When we look at this and we're seeing it, it's a static image. It's not moving, but there's an implication of movement here, a pelvis, more pelvises as they go back. So we're seeing this moving down the stairs. There's different ways to show, let's say, movement in a piece of artwork without it actually being animated. So example, if we had a ball and we wanted to show that that ball was moving fast, we might have some lines streaking behind it. It's moving fast. If it's moving really fast, it might have flames behind it. See what I mean there? How we're making it imply that there's this movement in this static image. Okay? Then let's move on to censorship. Censorship is one of those subject matters that you guys are at a great age to really broach this subject matter. What is it? It is basically someone having the power to exert over you whether you can or you cannot do something, partake in something, and they have the power to control you. Okay? So, how do you feel about censorship? Some people absolutely hate it. Some people think that it's okay in certain situations. And then there are other people who are like, yes, everybody needs to be censored. We really need some censorship happening. First of all, parents. Parents are generally the first ones who raise their hand of, yes, we want censorship because I don't want my child to be exposed to something too young of an age. So, example, being an artist, I have probably not censored my kids as much as other parents have, just because there are some things that I don't think need to be censored. Just pornography and things like that, yes, of course. Does nudity? No, not necessarily. I kind of feel like you came into the world nude, and there shouldn't be anything shameful in the human body. If you look in the Bible, you're going to find nudity portrayed, and so therefore it shouldn't be something that we're trying to hide from. Now at the college, we do have a censorship kind of policy happening where we don't allow nudity to be shown in the open gallery spaces. The only place that nudity or nude artwork can be shown is inside the art studio. Okay, so how do I feel about this personally as an artist? I don't really like for that to happen because I know my students worked hard in their life drawing class, a class that they took, to learn how to draw the human body, and we can't show that. We can't, put that up on the wall and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Be impressed by the artwork that is being done. That kind of bothers me a little bit, but I also understand for those parents who are uncomfortable with their child seeing nudity. I mean, we have the daycare on campus, so there are little kids on their leashes walking across campus all the time, so they could be, exposed to something that their parents wouldn't want them to be exposed to. How did this happen? When I was a student, we didn't have those censorship issues. But as the college has grown and more people are coming in and out, conferences, all of those sorts of things, we are having people on campus that maybe don't necessarily want to see this artwork. I can remember coming in one day and an artwork or an art show from the students was going up. And when I walked in the door, I got all these dirty looks. And I ducked into the art studio and was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I say? I have offended someone. And then I walked out because I'm like, I'm going to go ask my boss. Before she comes and hunts me down, I'm going to ask my boss. I walk out and I see a photograph, about 11 by 14, fully frontal nude in a Christ crucified pose, a black and white photograph of a student nude, a male. And so I went over to my boss's office. She didn't know anything about why I would be in trouble. So, I told her about what I thought it was. And then as I'm walking out the door, the president of the college is hand delivering this piece to me and does not want it up on the walls. Well, there were things that were happening over in the theater where the gallery's at that all of these people were seeing this full frontal nude and were kind of in shock about it. It wasn't anything that was distasteful. But to make a long story short, the student bucked the system and tried to put it back up again. I wasn't there the first time it was put up. Then they put it up again. I'm supposed to be there to make sure, see what's going on and going up. When they did that the second time, then they cut it all off. Said, no more of this. You can't put it out there. I, at the time, had my oldest son at the daycare, and he was like, Mom, can I see it? Can I see what they're talking about? He's only 5 years old. I had a proud parent moment when he looked at it, and he said, well, I don't see how his is any different than mine. I'm going to end this part of this section here, and we will pick up on who creates the art influences of the public's perception of the value of art in the next section.